Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, Clarifying Denver's Guidance on Outdoor versus Indoor Structures. We will give it just a moment to see if we get any more of our registered participants, and then I will kick it over to Sonia Riggs, the President and CEO of the Colorado Restaurant Association, to start us off.
Okay, why don't I get started? Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Sonia Riggs. I'm the President and CEO of the Colorado Restaurant Association. I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that we hear from restaurants every single day about how much you are struggling. So we are doing everything we can in our power to try to help. I know that many of you are reaching your breaking point. Just know, obviously, we're doing a PPP seminar on Friday to help you understand what you need to do to get that next round of funding on PPP. We'll continue to look for other ways to help. Please keep an eye on our emails, which we send out almost daily to try to give you important updates on what's happening, especially as we see changes with the red level going to orange, the 5-star program, and so forth. Meanwhile, I do want to say it's also really nice to see how many of you are really pivoting to try to do whatever you can to find other revenue sources, such as this outdoor dining program. And that's really why we're here today. Obviously this is new for us, dining outdoors, especially in the winter months. As it gets cold, luckily we've had quite a few nice days so far this winter. But I want to acknowledge that we, as well as Eat Denver, have been getting a number of questions about various tent structures, when something is considered outdoor versus indoor. What are some of the nuances that you need to know that, while you're trying to keep your customers safe, certainly you also want to keep them comfortable at the same time. And we've had a lot of just overall questions on what is allowed and what's not allowed. So that's what we're here to answer today. Today, we are joined by various officials from the city of Denver who will discuss the definition of indoor versus outdoor spaces for your outdoor seating areas and how regulations are defined for tents, igloos, and other outdoor enclosures. We have a number of departments here represented today from the city and county of Denver, including Community Planning and Development, Denver Public Health, Excise and Licensing, the Department of Transportation, and the Fire Department. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John Hill. I just want to make a quick announcement, though. First of all, we do acknowledge and just note, this is one thing we were talking about before we let you all in on what's happening in Washington, D.C. So we've been watching that closely. We'll let one of you speak briefly on what's happening in Denver, but it sounds like there may be a gathering in Civic Center Park there as well. So just be aware, especially for you folks that are in that downtown area, that you should just be prepared. I'll turn it over, though, to John Hill with Denver Economic Development. I just want to quickly remind you, though, that if you have questions or comments, you're listening to the discussion on your computer, please use the Q&A function in your Zoom window. We will be posting a recording of the discussion in about 24 hours in the COVID-19 Resource Center on the CRA website. So with that, John Hill with Denver Economic Development. Please take it away, and we look forward to hearing what you all have to say. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Sonia, and thanks everyone for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. Today we want to dive into your questions about the regulations around outdoor space. We know there's been a lot of questions about what is considered an outdoor space, how tents can be set up, how heating strategies can be implemented, and questions like that. I'm joined today by subject matter experts from our regulatory agencies who will walk you through the various aspects of outdoor seating and help you gain a better understanding of what's allowable. At the end of our presentation, we'll be happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. We do know that everyone is anxious about the 5-star implementation or the program implementation in Denver. We won't be able to discuss that on today's call, but I can let you know that the City and County of Denver submitted their application to the state on December 30th. We're now just awaiting feedback and approval from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. For 5-star, about 7,000 businesses in Denver would be able to apply for the program. So the city has been working with the business community on program logistics in order to successfully implement this as quickly and efficiently as possible. We will plan to have another town hall in the near future to talk specifically about 5-star. So we ask that you hold your questions about the program until then. I do briefly also just want to mention that the city is launching another round of the Small Business Emergency Relief Fund. This is the grant program that Denver Economic Development and Opportunity has run since April. There have been a couple changes, one of which I think will be advantageous to a number of you. The minimum or the maximum revenue amount has increased from $2 million to $2.5 million in this round. So I think that opens it up to more people. Also, if you received a grant in 2020, you can apply now for a grant in 2021. So I will make sure that we share the link to that application, and that's about it for that. For now, I'd like to move on to the program and introduce you to Danica Lee, who is a director with Denver Department of Public Health and Environment.
Thanks so much, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So good afternoon, everybody. I just want to say real quickly that I have so much just compassion for where you all are at right now. And I think that our restaurant community has been hit as hard as anybody. And please know that that is something that is taken very into account with everything that we do right now. And I know we're in a really tough situation where public health advisories and considerations have directly negatively impacted business. And you all are as hard hit again as anybody, but you know, I'm optimistic as we look ahead to, you know, the coming weeks and months as we work towards, you know, getting vaccine distributed, which is also a topic for another meeting. So hang in there, and please know that we are thinking about you and in solidarity with all of our small businesses here in Denver. So I did want to start with a situational update here, moving along to this slide, and just to provide some context for this entire conversation. What you can see on the left there is a chart that depicts the cases identified in Colorado. And so everybody's pretty familiar with the spikes that we've had. And it is pretty shocking to look at this now and see what our most recent spike looks like compared to the spike of cases that we saw over the summer, and then even initially too. And I do also want to point out that the height of this most recent spike coincided pretty much exactly with when more restrictive public health orders were put in place. So, you know, around the week of November 18th, that week before Christmas, there were much more restrictive Denver and state orders in place. And, you know, that did impact, undoubtedly a variety of factors impacted the case rates. And please keep in mind, it's no single thing that we're doing. So a lot of the strategies that we're doing, they're overlapping, and altogether they drive down cases. Now, if I had put up here a state like Pennsylvania or Illinois, if I'm remembering correctly, you would have seen that at that November spike, you know, they actually continued to go straight up after that. And so, you know, Colorado is in relatively good shape right now. You can see that we have a bit of an uptick here that we're watching very closely right now, just over the last few days. And so, you know, we don't know yet if this is the start of a new trend. Hopefully it's not. On the right here, you can see a comparison by county of our metro region. And so Denver is the green line there. And again, you can see that same kind of uptick here. So, you know, we are being as vigilant as ever with measures that we're and focusing on this data to inform us. And we'll certainly stay in touch. You can also access the data on the right, as well as a bunch of other data through dashboards that we have. And I'm happy to post that in the link after I'm done in the chat. After this
Can
meeting.
I ask a quick question about that? Is the one on the right, new cases by county, is that per 100,000 or is that total?
You know, I was thinking somebody might ask me that, Sonia. I believe it's per 100,000, but when I was trying to verify that prior to this meeting, it wasn't labeled. It wasn't depicted on the label. So I have to confirm that and get back to you. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, real quick, providing some context for all this. What do we know about transmission in restaurants? I've heard a lot of folks saying that there's no data that suggests that there's any transmission in restaurants. And I wanted to provide some background on that, because that's not what the local public health department is seeing. And this is not to alarm anybody. You know, as long as we are heading in the right direction, we do need to loosen restrictions, but I definitely want to make sure we're all on the same page and you have, from our point of view, what the risks are. So we know that COVID spreads in indoor settings where people where people spend time together without face coverings. And it spreads between households when people from different households get together, obviously. What we don't see in our data right now is a lot of customers of restaurants tied to outbreaks at restaurants. So if you look on the state health department's website, you know, there are a lot of outbreaks associated with restaurants listed, but it's mostly employees. And that's because that's where we can pick up on that data. Our surveillance systems are not effective at present at identifying clusters of cases between diners and restaurants. And there's a number of reasons for that. We had to stop contact tracing for 2 months. So in October until actually the end of December, there was no contact tracing going on because of the case surge. And so we also don't use phone data like in some countries like South Korea. They will track everybody by their phone data, and we're not, you know, we don't have that level of access, nor are we asking for it to be able to monitor things as closely. What I do want to say is that we know from dealing with a bunch of different outbreaks across many different types of workplace settings that we do see transmission occurring in break rooms where people eat together. And so, as well as other factors as well, but that has been a significant one. So I just kind of wanted to level set with that information and share that with you all. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Danica, I'm sorry. Can I just ask you one more question?
Yeah, sure thing.
So when you're looking at restaurant employees as outbreaks in restaurants versus diners, and I understand what you're just saying about diners, but in other workplaces, those are considered workplace outbreaks. Why would our restaurant, but it sounds like from what I'm hearing, if it happens in a restaurant environment where it's among the workplace people, that's considered, instead of a workplace environment, it's considered a restaurant environment. Is that the case, or am I misunderstanding?
No, we have it broken down by all different types of workplace settings, just for the context of this conversation. I was referring to restaurants.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so moving now into kind of what is an indoor versus what is an outdoor structure. So temporary outdoor structures have been used in a lot of different facilities in Denver, and there's pros and cons, there's challenges. Right now, because we've moved into the orange, you can actually use a temporary outdoor structure as an indoor space. You can't seat as many people there as you would if you had two non-adjacent sides open. But so what you have to, you know, the conditions or specifications that your tent must meet to be considered an outdoor setting by both the state health department and local health departments is two non-adjacent sides of that tent or space must be completely open to provide airflow. And so the standard that the state is looking for is airflow similar to outdoors, because it's much lower risk when you have that level of airflow to have transmission. If you have just two adjacent sides open, that does not meet the definition for outdoor. So it really has to be these two non-adjacent sides that are entirely open. And I get that poses huge challenges for being able to serve as a dining space on cold days and in the evenings. But it does address the transmission concern that we had. Now, as I said, because we have moved into the orange, if you have a tent, you may choose to keep all sides down and operate as an indoor space. So next slide, and I'll talk about that. Okay, so under the orange level, you can have 25% capacity in your indoor settings. And to determine the capacity of a temporary outdoor structure, it's based on the square footage. So in an area with seating, there's about, you have to allocate 15 square feet per person. So if you have a 400 square foot tent, you're going to divide that by 15 and then divide it again by 4 to get to that 25% capacity. I know this is kind of confusing to try to explain quickly, and we're happy to send out guidance around this or consult with you if you need assistance figuring out what your capacity is. And then if you're using that space as an outdoor setting, and so if you have 2 non-adjacent sides totally open, there's no set limit, but you have to have a minimum spacing of 6 feet between people who are sitting at different tables. So I will stop there, and I believe I'm passing it on to the next speaker now. Thanks very much.
A quick question here for me. We've got a couple of questions that are coming in that I think might be directly pertaining to your comments. Is it okay if I ask those now, or do you want me to wait till the end?
I can see them. How about I try to tackle them when we move through the presentation?
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Danica. So we're now going to move on to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and we're joined by Nicole Edwards and Michael Holm, who will walk you through this.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Danica, thank you for sharing all of that information, and mostly I thank you for taking the time to give the expression to the restaurant community. I agree with you and just want to ditto the sentiment of the compassion and the empathy that we do have for the restaurant community, which is really how we created this program to begin with, just really on the cuff. None of us had been through the COVID experience before and definitely did not anticipate what was coming. And so we too have a huge space where we're empathetic towards what your business situation is right now. So with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, I'm Nicole Edwards, and I am working and talking with you today about how you can either apply for a permit to be able to have an outdoor expansion, and or if you are needing to extend your permit. Currently, we're working on and extending through January 31st, 2021, and we're also beginning to take the applications and review for those that will extend through February 1st to April 30th, 2021, and or if you've never participated before, then we'll give you a little guidance there as well. Wanted to be able to share with you as we're looking at specifically talking about the tents and how that spacing works. I just wanted to ensure you, when we're coming from the DOTI, which is Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, our number one goal is safety. So when we're looking at and reviewing this, we're looking to make sure that, first of all, there's no conflict that exists within, within the right-of-way. Meaning that we're looking to make sure that with your expansion, there wouldn't be conflict with construction, special events, emergencies, etc. And so we're also looking to make sure and offering still within the parking lane, the tree lawn, and or the sidewalk. And it's vital, it's very important that when you're submitting your site plan, that you're as exact as possible so that we can review according to ADA compliance and other regulatory needs that we have within the right-of-way to keep the entire community safe. And so when you're doing your site plan, whether it's new or existing, we're asking that you're very clear with indicating the tables, chairs, if you have railings, decks, pergolas, heaters, etc. It's vital that you indicate all of that on your site plan so that we can review accordingly, as well as be able to give you the appropriate guidance for the area. It's also important that we keep in mind with the right-of-way that we're also keeping not only the ADA, but you want to make sure that we're keeping a flow line for the curb and the inlet so that they're not blocked, so that if there is snow or rain, that we have the appropriate flow through those areas and that we don't cause any type of flooding. Excuse me. We also want to make sure when we're reviewing that there's not issue with utility access. And we have to talk a lot to you about the weather. Now that we're in the winter months of this, we want to make sure that you're prepared for the snow removal and recognizing that the program is temporary in nature and that your setup that would be appropriate to be able to be removed out of the right of way when needed, when there is the snow removal. Next slide, please. So for those of you that currently have a permit, you would need to, if you're extending, you would need to do an email to DOTI, which is Dottie, permitoperations@denvergov.org. You would indicate with your current permit number that you're interested in extending the expansion, as well as your updated site plan, and then the process would go from there. For those of you that are new to the program, we encourage you to visit www.denvergov.org/outdoor expansion. I encourage it even before making application, because all of the agencies have done a great job of putting together guidance on the website to give you an idea of how this could work and what it could look like. So for either one of those, I would encourage that you're able to visit the website and submit there. We also have a how-to video. We recognize that sometimes working with the city can be a little daunting for people at times. And so we did take the time, and there's a video there that walks you step by step on how to start the process if you are starting from the beginning. If you're starting from the beginning, you will do an interest application, and from that interest application, you will be provided with your next steps and the guidance along the way. Mike, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Nicole. You covered a lot of that very well. As far as the sidewalks go, we also need to maintain the public access through there for the general public to be able to pass by your restaurant on the public sidewalk or in another space designated and provided for them to do that. So that's the only thing I was going to add to that. Thank you.
Is that all for Dottie?
Yes, sir, until the Q&A.
Sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on to community planning and development. We have Scott Prisco with us to answer some questions. Scott?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here again with the Restaurant Association. We're going to go over different structures that can be built in the right of way, and in the different aspects that involves, depending if it's a tent or a structure. Next slide, please. So, the tent, basically any tent of any size, it's not going to need a building permit as long as it's erected for a period of 180 days or less. And there is one permit that will be required, but it's not a building permit. If it's over 200 square feet, then you're going to have to get a DFD operational permit, a fire department operational permit. So those are the only criteria in terms of permitting for tents themselves. They do have to get reviewed, as Nicole and Mike had mentioned, by Dottie when they're in the right of way. When they're in private property, those locations only get an operational permit if they're over 200 square feet. Next slide, please. So when you're getting your tent, there are some important components to be looking at. One is the flame spread of the tent, and there's a numerical value. NFPA is an organization that a testing organization that at 701, their flame propagation testing. That's really important that it meets those criteria from a life safety perspective. So please, if you're investing in a tent, make sure that it meets that criteria. DFD is going to be looking at that when you go to pull the operational permit. When you're locating the tents, simple things like, you're not going to put it in front of a doorway, but you also don't want to put it in front of the Siamese connection, that fire department connection for their hoses. Obviously, if there's an emergency event, we want the folks at the fire department to be able to get to that connection quickly. And one other point, if the tent is over 49 folks that could be in the tent, you're going to need 2 means of egress from the tent. As Danica had mentioned earlier, a good rule of thumb, it's 15 square foot per person, when you're figuring out the capacity of a tent, and that's normal table and chair occupancy. Next slide, please. So what other structures, what else can you do without a permit? So anything under 120 square feet will not require a permit if it's there for 180 days or less. And then if you have a freestanding canopy that only has a fabric or a tent type structure, and 3 of the sides are open, that will not need a permit, a building permit as well. Once it gets over that 200 square foot size, again, it will need a DFD operational permit. Next slide, please. So when do you need a permit? When do you need a building permit? The patios that are over, any structure over 120 square feet is going to need a building permit. And if it's mounted to the building, similar to the photograph that you see here, if there's something mounted to the building, then that's going to need a permit. If it's on private property, what we have waived some of the permitting for just awnings. If it's in the right of way, we will do a tertiary review, but to make it easier for you to get this through our process, we've worked closely with Dottie that they have to review it anyway. We'll just do a review through that process. So we're going to need to make sure that the snow loading criteria is there, but if it's in the right of way, we can omit the building permit to make it easier for you. Other things like a raised deck or barriers or fences that are over 5 foot 9 inches high. We want to make sure that the wind loading, it's not going to cause a problem, a life safety problem in a wind event. And all of these would be, instances where you're under 180 days again. And I know it seems simple sometimes when you have something, just a simple attachment to the wall of your building. Why do I need to get that reviewed? But we're very concerned about snow loading, especially in Denver. We have some pretty dramatic snow events at times, and attachment to a building with a tent could actually pull down a parapet wall or an exterior wall if it's not structurally correct or has the structural integrity for that type of loading. And so that's the reason why we want to be involved and evaluate those from a structural integrity point of view. Next slide, please. When we're looking at lighting and heating in the tents, it's really important that we're not running all these sort of daisy chain cords back into the inside on an inside outlet. You want to use exterior rated cords that are plugging into an outlet on the outside. And we don't want to create any trip hazard with all these connections. So it's really ideal if you can have these direct connected into an outlet or hardwired. That is the preferred route for lighting on the outside. Next slide, please. In terms of propane heaters, obviously a propane heater should not be put under a tent. That would be a bad idea. It's not allowed. And any propane heat will require a fire department a permit as well, an operational permit. Most of the installations that we've seen are the propane heaters that have the blower type when there's a tent involved, so that there's a blower that the heating elements are outside of the tent, and then there's a blower that blows the warm air into the tent. That's what we're seeing the most of in terms of tents with heating in them. Next slide, please. When you're connecting to the building utility, so if you're going to create a heating element, say that is either a gas-fired heating element or an electric heating element, and it's going to tie to your existing gas piping or your existing electrical system, those are going to require a plumbing permit or an electrical permit. And Those will require engineer drawings to be reviewed by our plan review team to make sure that we're not overloading the gas piping, or that we're not overloading the electrical system, which is something that obviously is a higher hazard for a fire event. Generators are also going to require an electrical permit, and we'll get a fire department review as well. Next slide, please. When you're obtaining the permits, we're trying to really expedite these. We're looking at a 2-day review time. So if you submit plans to our department for any type of permit for an outdoor seating area, we're going to try and stick to that 2-day time frame. Sometimes it may take a day just to get logged in, but once it's logged in, our plan reviewers know to expedite all of your projects. We're trying to make this a priority. We understand how important this is for your revenue and in these difficult times. We're trying to make sure that we're accommodating as much as we can. These are the links. The denvergov.org /e-permits is the portal. There are some great guides. As Nicole had mentioned earlier, we also have some guides and some videos that help walk you through if you haven't done this before. We know this is not the normal world that you guys are operating in terms of pulling permits and whatnot. So we tried to make it as easy as possible. We're always available for questions if you're struggling through our process. Don't wait a week to say what's going on. Please dive in and call us if there are issues early on. Don't wait too long. We're trying to help you get your permitting as quick as possible. Next slide, please. Probably one of the biggest things that we're seeing, one of the biggest issues, is when we realize there's a big capital outlay for some of the patios that we're seeing. They're very extensive, and so folks are wanting to make them more. They want to know if they can make it permanent, but they want it done quickly, temporarily. But they don't want to have an outlay of 2 different cash outlays for, well, if I have to do this permanent, I don't want to have to pay for this from a temporary perspective and then have to do more work under a permanent one. And it is difficult. There's a challenge. Hopefully you can work with your architects and say, hey, we want this to be permanent, but we want to go through the temporary process first. That's what I would recommend, that you're going to go through our 2-day review process. But when you're working with your architect engineers, let them know that you want to do it permanently, so that the drawings that they're submitting and the details they're working with you will work from a temporary and a permanent basis. So there's not a big change from that temporary to permanent process. So what can happen is you can get your temporary approval from all of the work groups, from DOTI, DFD, and Community Planning and Development. Get those approvals, get your temporary situation up and running, and you can simultaneously then be working on a permanent process to get your patio approved. The biggest difference is the zoning criteria. Because of the COVID situation, zoning has the ability to waive certain requirements. So there's a faster process for you for this temporary situation. When you go through the permanent process, all of the zoning requirements are still going to be in place. And that's why the process, as it's shown here, is about 3 to 4 months, because if it's in private property, you're going to have to go through a full zoning review and a building review and SUDP and other reviews and health department. So there's multiple agencies that need to review your project and go through multiple steps. So we want to make sure that you realize the level of complexity going into a permanent. It's not to say that you cannot do it. You definitely can do it. You have an opportunity to do it if it's zoned correctly and you have the right amount of area and all the criteria are met. We want to work with you to make this permanent. We realize Denver has a great environment to have outdoor dining, and we want to help you get there. There are opportunities to do this in the right of way, but again, there are transportation reviews and reviews from the DOTI engineering team, that along with all the zoning and other issues too. So if that's something you want to consider, you're welcome to do that. Just know that process is not a 2-day review. Then it's going to take months to get through it. So the recommendation is you do the first step, get the temporary up and running. And if you want to go permanent, go ahead and do that again as you're utilizing the temporary outdoor dining. Next slide, please. And these are the contacts so that if you have questions, or if you're 3 days into this and you haven't heard anything from anybody, feel free to reach out to us. If you're in for a building permit, contact us, the architectural structural plan review team. If it's electrical or mechanical, contact the appropriate contacts on that. Mechanical plumbing.review@denvergov.org. I think the next slide is the fire department presentation. I know we had some issues at our municipal buildings that we were asking our folks to vacate because of some possible protests. Captain Holtz was going to present. Captain, were you able to come back? I can't see the attendee list. If you're here, I'm glad to review your slides if you are not here.
I don't think he is.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know that. So I'll go through his a few slides. So again, if a tent is over 200 square feet, you're going to have to go through Captain Holtz's team and get a fire department operational permit. Any canopy over 400 square feet requires that same type of permit. And then if there are temporary heaters, any type of heating is going to require an operational permit as well. The normal safety devices are going to be required inside any tent. You're going to have approval of a layout of fire extinguishers. They have to be a two-way 10 BC extinguisher. There may be multiple extinguishers required based on the size of the tent, and that will all be outlined with you during the operational permit process. So that you'll be working with the fire department plan review team that works with Captain Holtz. Next slide, please. The other thing that will be required are the exit signs. And there has to be a layout with the tables and chairs so that we can see, as you know, from having restaurants, there's certain path of travel and widths required to allow free egress. It's a little bit easier to ensure that now with the separation that you need anyway from the health department between spaces, so that that's sort of a natural, easy progression to get the exiting and egress requirements. Again, to emphasize, if you're getting a tent, make sure that it meets the NFPA 701 requirement. Any tent over 49 occupants is going to require a second means of egress. And again, if you're looking at calculating that, it's 15 square feet per person if you have table and chair layout. And obviously there's no smoking in any tents, and the exit signs have to be clearly posted at the exit. Next slide, please. So there's no heating or cooking in the tent. Obviously, no cooking in the tent, and no flames or any other type of heating with flammable heating in the tent. The type that we're seeing again are the ducted systems. I think you've all seen them. It's an exterior unit that stays outside the tent, and then it usually has a low ductwork, plastic PVC ductwork that shoots warm air into the tent. That's what we're seeing for most of the applications where we have heated tents. Propane, even if you have extra tanks or whatever for the outdoor unit, they can't be stored in the tent, and you can't have any propane cylinders or anything secured, unsecured, or it all has to be stored and secured properly. And that'll be reviewed with you with the fire department team during the permitting process if there's any questions about that. Next slide, please. And these again are the contacts if you have any questions, depending on which permit that you're going to get. And I think that wraps up the fire department presentation. And these are just the different contacts on Steve's team. So if you have questions about anything regarding a tent, getting an operational permit for a heating element, please feel free to contact either Joe Flores or Captain Holtz. They will be glad to work with you. I think that's it for this presentation.
Scott, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And, thank you to everyone on this team. Really appreciate you coming out and lending some time. We're happy to take any questions. Sonia, I'll leave that up to you. And thank you again.
Thank you. So both, I know Eat Denver and also the Colorado Restaurant Association have been getting a number of questions. Katie Laser sent me a couple that she'd like me to ask. One being, and this is something we've also been working with at the state level, but what research is being looked at or done around indoor air circulation and effectiveness related to the spread of COVID?
I can try to take that. So locally, we're not, our staff are not doing any research, any formal research around this because we are completely consumed with COVID response, vaccine response, and kind of everything else that's going on. I know at the state, they have, I believe, a contact who is, and I can get more details. I'm not sure, but I know they have somebody at the state and who has been kind of a source of information and expertise in this area. So I would have to reach out to them to understand what research is being conducted.
Thank you. I'll just add that we have had several conversations with the state, speaking to some consultants and some engineers that we've had or that we work with here, and are continuing to reach back out to the state to try to have them consider other options as well. So we'll update folks as we know more and as we get any movement with that on the state level, but just know it's something that we've been working on as well. I do have another question here, which is, so I know both of our organizations have heard a lot about what kind of exceptions there might be for things like large garage doors. I know that on a call I was on the other day, a question came up, what if you're an indoor space, but you've got several doors that open floor to ceiling in your space? Are there any variances either particularly on either for indoor spaces and or for more permanent type of outdoor spaces that we might not have already thought of that may be considered, such as things like garage doors? Can you speak to that, please?
I can take that one, Sonia. So the same standard would apply if you wanted to, if the goal was to try to get a capacity similar to what's allowed in an outdoor setting, which is greater right now than what's allowed indoors, then that same standard of having two non-adjacent sides would have to be completely open. That's the guidance from the State Health Department.
Molly, I think you had a question, don't you?
I do. This person says, are you looking at extending the building permit rule for large tents to extend beyond the 180 days as restrictions are going way longer?
So from a building department perspective, when we issue a permit, if it's required, then we'll give 180 days, and then we'll give an extension. And I think October 31st or 21st is the cutoff date. I think Dominic has that information, and I think the operational permits can be extended as well. In terms of Dottie has different timeframes, I apologize, but the different departments have different criteria. So Mike or Nicole, if you want to talk about what the Dottie extension requirements are.
Sure, I'll jump in there. I wanted to help the restaurant community too and give a clarifier. All of the information that Scott was sharing is specific to community planning and development, which is related to private property. And so that is their criteria. Myself and Mike Holm are speaking in regard to the public right-of-way, which is a different criteria. And the program for the right-of-way is temporary in nature. It's the temporary outdoor expansion program. And due to the safety and the requirement of the right-of-way, we are doing renewals every 90 days. So we are participating absolutely through October 31st, 2021 as indicated. However, we must do a review every 90 days. And again, that's for the overall safety. It's really not to just rip you all and drive you crazy, but it's for the overall safety of the community as a whole.
Thank you. One of the things that we've been hearing about from restaurants and we've been watching happen, or at least conversations start to happen in other communities, which could be maybe one of the silver linings behind COVID, is that the creation of these expanded outdoor spaces, people have said, has really turned our city and others into give it more of a European feel and really kind of a friendly tourism feel, not only here, but up in different towns throughout the state. Has the city of Denver been talking about what the future might look like after, through the fall of 2021, what we might see these outdoor spaces look like in future years?
So we have our zoning team looking at a program, and I know we had a meeting this morning with this group talking about setting up an internal work group of how can we better inform the public about opportunities for more permanent outdoor dining to help advocate that point, so that we're creating this very unique outdoor environment. Obviously, there's a great opportunity to expand upon even further than what's been done now. And so there's certain zoning aspects that have to be looked at, and Tina Axelrad and our planning team are going to be looking at that later this year to see how we can work with the community on that. And I think Dominic was going to head up a work group that at some point will open that up probably to get input from the restaurant community to see that whatever we're looking at is the most appropriate, that's real and will work for this group.
Absolutely. Just to kind of piggyback on what Scott indicated, we've heard that a lot of the operators are interested in transitioning their temporary patios into permanent patios. And we have a path in place and a number of operators that are pursuing that. And then we've also heard that while some individuals aren't necessarily interested in a year-round permanent patio, they would really like the option of having it during the summer. And so we're going to formulate a working group to see how plausible that is, if we can streamline processes and bring that to the community in 2022.
Great, thank you. I think we have answered most every question, I believe. I know that several have been answered in the typed comments. Molly, remind me how we're going to post those that were on the Q&A typed that we may have not talked about live.
So anything that was answered in the Q&A function, we will download after this recording, and we will issue it out with the final recording as well, so everyone can access those questions and the answers to them as well.
Terrific. And then somebody asked for my email address, which I'm happy to give out, which is sriggs@corestaurant.org. But we have a staff of people also, because I'm woefully behind in emails, that is happy to answer questions at info@corestaurant.org. So any questions that we haven't answered today, if you think of any, please feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. Are there any closing comments that any of you on the Denver side would like to make before we go? I want to thank you again for all being here, but just throw it out in case there are any closing comments or things you think we may have missed.
Hi, it's Nicole again. I did want to come in and just share too that a part of the permitting process, the importance and the value with the tents, and if you're using heating elements, that the Denver Fire Department permit will be required prior to issuance of the DOTI permit, again, ensuring safety. I will share that the fire department has been a beautiful partner and that they're turning them around very quickly. I'd also like to see if we could take a few moments, and I'd like to lean on one of the experts on the panel and have Mike Holm just talk a little bit more maybe about the tents and DOTI per se, of some of what we've been seeing here, to be able to provide a little bit more guidance so that the business community isn't so just so that they have clarity when they're looking to do a site plan. So Mike, I don't know if there's just maybe some do's or don'ts that you may just want to provide for them.
Sure, Nicole, thanks.
Thank you.
For tents located in the public right of way, and that's the land that's actually owned by the city and county of Denver for the purpose of public movement and utilities and things like that. If it's going to be placed on the sidewalk, then the tent obviously cannot fully block the sidewalk. There's still requirements for access for the public to be able to walk by your restaurant on the sidewalk. If the tent doesn't fit there and it has to block so much of the sidewalk that the ADA width cannot be maintained there, then that path needs to be possibly provided in another manner, either through the parking lane, which could be difficult because there are curbs there, and also during snowstorms, that's where the snow usually goes, especially from plows that may be going by. There are also some drainage requirements. Also, I think you mentioned that earlier, Nicole. We can't have the water freezing into the flow lines underneath structures and like that, because it will block drainage to the inlets, and that could lead to a lot of slip and falls. The liability for that is something that the city doesn't want, and also you should, as the adjacent property owner, you should not want that liabilities either. Any other points that I'm missing, Nicole? There's some traffic safety points out there based on the posted speed limits for the street in front of your restaurant. There's requirements for barriers and barricades or cones or something like that, based on what that level that speed limit is next to the patio that would be located in like a parking lane or something like that. So there's also a safety concern there as well.
And I would just reiterate with Mike, one of the pieces we have been experiencing that I'm sure could just be, we want to be of a support to the community. And so I really encourage that before you do an install, that you actually make your application. One of the things that we've done is we put the cart before the horse in this to be able to assist you guys. And what we've done is that Mike's team comes out and provides an inspection of your site prior to the permit being issued, based upon the site plan that you submitted, so that we can ensure the regulatory needs are met in addition to the spacing need that you have. And so we're working our hardest to be in collaboration with you. And so it's imperative that you basically provide that site plan as accurate as possible. And I would just caution not to take the assumption that your site plan is going to be approved and then to move forward with your install. We don't want to basically have to come out and ask that you remove it or change it. It would be a lot better if we collaboratively work together and decide on it, approve it, and then you're able to install it. So keep in mind, these reviews include your Department of Transportation engineers, as well as the city traffic engineers, because we still have to keep the flow of traffic, pedestrian walk flow, the ADA, and the overall safety. The last piece I'd share is thinking about the snow removal. And I'd ask all of us to come from the human element, even in such a trying time. The truck is driven by a human, but it's a truck. The size of it, you can't control it, and you can't control how it sometimes tosses the snow, which is why we're asking you to really look towards the installs that are temporary, so that you have the ability to remove them as you need to for a bad snowstorm, so that your installment isn't damaged. So that's another piece that we really encourage you to have some consideration of. So those are just small pieces of lessons learned as we've been working on this, and just wanted to share it to help you to be able to be as successful as possible. Thanks, Mike, for your expertise.
Thank you. We do have one more question that came in that I'd like to ask. Danica, your slide seems to define a permanent roof as inside. Is that correct? We have a permanent roof with 3 sides of glass. Please comment.
So if it has a permanent roof and 3 sides are enclosed, then yes, that would, according to the state's criteria, be considered an indoor space and have to adhere to those requirements.
Thank you, everybody. One more reminder. First of all, thank you to folks from the City and County of Denver for being here today. We really appreciate your time in trying to clarify these outdoor spaces. We will, as a reminder, folks, post this recording on our website within 24 hours. We'll also share, obviously, with Eat Denver as well. And we'll type up the Q&A, send that out. If there are any other questions that were unanswered and you'd like us to still reach out to folks at the city to get them answered, send those to info@corestaurant.org, and we will add them to the Q&A and post that on the website as well. So thank you all again. We appreciate your time, and we'll be back in touch, as John said, as soon as Denver's got the 5-star program up and running, to answer your questions about that as well. Have a great day, everybody.
Good
Thank you.
day.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.